Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us either in real time today, this morning, or after the fact if you are watching this as a recording. We really appreciate your time and your interest in the MTSS Academies. And we're really excited to share more about what we have planned for next year and see which of our offerings may be a good fit for the things that you're planning for in next year. I want to three things this morning. We're going to start off with just a little bit of context about the academies themselves, but also how it fits within the greater context of our Center for School and District Partnership, and a new catalog that we put out this year that gives an overview of many of the different types of initiatives that we have coming out of the agency. We're trying to align things to create a bit more coherence so that you know what's the bigger landscape of what the supports that are going to be offered next year, and so you can make more strategic choices about where you want to prioritize. Then a good bulk of the meeting will be spent on each of our 7 academies, sort of 7.5. We'll go into that in a minute. We'll have an opportunity to have about 5 minutes to give an overview of their particular work, the focus, key things that you might need to know in terms of team composition, the types of activities you'd be engaged in, the goals of the academy itself. And then in the third part of the meeting, we'll have this virtual walkabout where participating folks from schools and districts can bounce between breakout rooms and talk personally to the various providers of the supports that we're putting out. We will not record that section, but if you are participating after the fact, watching the recording, there's information both from DESE, like you can contact me directly at rebecca.shore@mass.gov, or each of the academy offerings has a contact person that you can reach out to and ask them specific questions. So that's the lineup for today. And as I mentioned, want to just start by doing a little bit of context setting, especially this year, because we're taking a slightly different approach. If you've attended one of these MTSS Academy webinars in the past, you're accustomed to the fact that we like to have an opportunity for people to hear a little bit about each of the academies that we're offering. We're still doing that this year, but we're really trying to create a bit more coherence. One of the things that we've heard and certainly experienced for ourselves is that the department has a lot of really interesting and helpful initiatives and supports, but sometimes it's like drinking from a fire hose and trying to get a lay of the land of what's coming out so that you can really prioritize which are the things that are best aligned to what your school or district's priorities are for next year. So I want to talk a little bit about that. One of the things that we have been doing at the agency over this last school year is trying to take a look at the various frameworks and tools that we put out to help support schools and districts in school and district improvement efforts. You may recognize some of these. At the bottom there is the MTSS Blueprint. We also, a lot of folks were focused in the past 2 years around acceleration. So we have an acceleration roadmap. We have the L Blueprint. We have, for those of you who have been engaged in school improvement work, we have the turnaround practices research, and we have frameworks around deeper learning. And we imagine this can feel a little bit overwhelming in terms of, okay, this is all good stuff, but how does it fit together? And sometimes the onus has been on schools and districts to make sense of all of these different frameworks in one coherent vision for school improvement. So one of the things that we've been doing over this last year within the center, within the agency, we have a new Center for School and District Partnership, which consists of 4 offices, some of which you may have worked with directly. One is the Kaleidoscope Collective for Learning. That's the part of the agency that is really building out our vision and supports around deeper learning. Many of you have probably been engaged with the statewide system of support. That's the branch of the agency which our office has actually comes out of, that works specifically with schools and districts that have been identified through the accountability system. We have education technology, and we also have the Office of Language Acquisition. And so in a recent reorganization within the agency, we've all come together to form the Center for School and District Partnership. And many of the frameworks that we just showed came out from each of our respective offices. And one of the things that we're trying to do is think about how can we bring those frameworks together and create sort of a coherence guide around what does really good school improvement look like that takes into account multi-tiered supports, that takes into account English learner needs and deeper learning and turnaround research all into one package. So we're going to have a lot more information about that coming out in the next year, but we just wanted to preview it because we'll be anchoring a lot of the work that we do across the center, including around the multi-tiered systems of support through that new sort of framework. Here's a snapshot of what that looks like. And this is not meant to be a webinar about the framework itself, so I'm going to go through this really briefly. But it really involves like 4 key pieces. One around setting the vision of what is the experience that we want students and adults to have in schools, with really anchored in a vision for deeper learning. And then what is the instructional design, both in terms of the learning environment and the instructional vision and implementation to allow that manifestation to happen of that vision. Then we look at what kinds of multi-tiered supports are needed in order to meet every student's needs in that work. That's where we start to get into some of the work that we've been focused on through the MTSS Academies and Blueprint. And then finally, what are the systems and structures that allow those supports to come off the ground? So thinking about how do we recruit and develop and support staff in building their competencies around that work? What types of improvement cycles are we using? Resource allocation, et cetera. That last piece is also a big part of what we've talked about in the MTSS work. Like, what are those systems that allow the multi-tiered supports to come off the ground? This here, though, within that overall framework, right, because that involves a lot of potential areas of focus and priorities. For this year, especially moving into the next school year, I'm looking for a piece of wood to knock on right now that hopefully we'll be probably engaged in one of the most quote unquote normal school years that we've had in a number of years. And we know that schools and districts and our students and families and staff are all sort of demonstrating a lot of resilience and figuring out how to come back from a highly atypical series of years of schooling based from the pandemic. And in that, we're really trying to focus on like, what are 3 of the most important things that we might really want to pay attention to? So a lot of our supports this year are going to be around these 3 areas. One, around sense of belonging. So really thinking about that learning environment. How are we ensuring that every student feels connected, feels safe physically and emotionally, that people know each other and feel seen and heard and valued? How are we really having a laser-like focus on grade appropriate instruction so that every student has access to culturally responsive instruction that is appropriate for their grade level and helps them master the standards and practices? And then finally, how are we thinking strategically about the planning and coherence of the efforts that we have going on? So if you've already logged into the Center for School and District Partnership Targeted Assistance Partnership Catalog, you'll see that all of the offerings that we have are organized under these 3 categories. Now, we know, as with a lot of things, sometimes work melds between more than one category, which is natural and actually really good in terms of integrating the work. But we've tried to sort of loosely categorize them based on like what's one of the leading characteristics of that particular support. So if you are either looking at our MTSS Academy page, you'll see we still list all of the academies, but there's also a link to a site that goes through our entire catalog The catalog includes information about all of the academies, but it also has offerings from the other 3 offices that I mentioned within the Center for School and District Partnership, and as well as some offerings from our Center for Instructional Support. And we have folks representing that team here today too. So if you're going in, you're interested, like what's the lay of the land of what we have to offer, just wanted to do a little bit of orienting on how that is all organized. In addition to outlining like what's like the key area that the support is focused on, you'll also see in the catalog that it's categorized by the type of support. So we have some that are around grants. And for example, today we have Allison representing their Center for Instructional Support about GLEAM, the early literacy grant. We have some individualized supports. So those are related to schools and districts that are supported by the statewide system of support and receive regional assistance. We have some specific offerings around that. We have a number of different networks as well as workshop series. And then finally, of course, we have the MTSS Academies. And that's where we're going to be spending the bulk of the time during this particular webinar. But again, at the end of the Academy presentations, you'll have the opportunity to hear about some of the other offerings in the catalog. So in regards to the academies themselves, just wanted to highlight a few key threads that we have running throughout all of 7 of the academies that we're offering. Each of the academies is a bit different, both in terms of the content that they're focused on, as well as the types of supports or who the desired team composition is. And they're going to be talking about some of those differences and unique qualities momentarily. But in general, some of the common themes is that, of course, each of the academies is aligned with helping to operationalize and implement key components of a multi-tiered system of support, whether that's related to literacy or social, emotional, and behavioral supports, or thinking about culturally responsive leadership or teaching. That multi-tiered system of supports is a common thread. All of them involve a combination of PD, capacity building in coaches. There's both in-person and virtual support. That's been, sort of a flexible target in the last couple of years. Of course, over the last 2 years, it was largely virtual, but we're moving back into a lot of in-person supports, and we'll be working with participating teams to figure out what makes most sense for them in their local context. And then there's also district or school-specific TA, or technical assistance. They're all multi-year commitments, generally 3 years. They all look for a multidisciplinary team structure, and they especially bridging the school and district work. So making sure that if it's a school level team, that there is district representation to ensure that the right decisions are able to be advocated for, and that there's sustainability and replicability in the district. Or conversely, if it's a team working at the district level, making sure that there's school representation so that the decisions that are being made are really aligned with the needs that folks are feeling in the classroom and school level. And of great note, all of the academies are free to participating schools and districts, which is fantastic. And we're really happy to be able to create sort of an economy of scale in being able to support these providers to support all of you. It is important to note that we do prioritize schools or districts that have schools that have been identified through the accountability system, in particular districts with schools that are in the percentiles of the 1 through 10 percentile, or have been identified for having a specific student group that is low performing relative to their peers in the state, or have a low graduation rate. But as many of you have probably experienced before, we often have extra capacity. Usually we have extra capacity. So even if you are a school or district that is not identified in one of those aspects in the accountability system, good chance that we may be able to support you regardless. And in some cases, there are a couple academies that if we're not able to support you, have a lower than normal cost version to be able to opt in. I mentioned this briefly before, but the application process is going to look a little different than it did previously. We still have our MTSS Academy page posted on the DESE website, and you can still get all the in-depth information. We include a flyer about each academy. We have what's called an at-a-glance document, which allows like sort of the same information to be looked at across each group. So what's the theory of action? How does their work relate to creating more equitable learning environments and instruction and supports for students and families? Thinking about some of the key benchmarks, like what can I expect 6 months in, a year and a half, et cetera. So that is all posted. But in order to actually apply, we've streamlined things. So each academy or each offering does not have its own individual application anymore. Instead, we have one application for the entire targeted assistance partnership catalog. It is much streamlined, so you don't have to answer as many questions. And we are, as best to your ability, asking districts to submit a singular application that lays out, all of the different supports that they're looking for at the district and school level. In order to help people plan for that, on the application page, you'll see there's a planning tool that we built, which you're welcome to download and use, that lists all of the offerings that we're putting out there. And you can fill out the columns however makes most sense, whether it's like a district team and then a column for each school. So you can start to plan out and see the whole landscape of what you're thinking about and make final decisions. Never fear though, if you submit and then you realize, oh no, we need to change this, you can always log back in and change it up. There's also contact information on that page if you have any challenges or need to talk any of that through. But we're really trying to simplify things for districts, and also so that it doesn't feel so piecemeal of all these individual applications, but really one coherent application together. As we've done in the past, it's sort of open rolling registration or applications right now, but we'll make a first round of decisions after May 20th. So if you're really interested in participating, we really recommend that you try to get your application in by May 20th. At that point, we'll take stock of all the applications that have come in and make first round of decisions about who we're able to accept. At that time, you may be accepted or waitlisted for a particular support that you applied for. And then we'll have it open for a while longer, depending on the demand and the extent to which each support is full. Sometimes we close like certain items that have been full, but we have other supports or academies that still have bandwidth, and sometimes those applications stay up longer. But May 20th is not a hard deadline. So if you don't submit by May 20th, it doesn't mean that you're cut off from having access, but that is sort of the preferred deadline. So encourage folks to try to get it in by then. Just want to briefly preview. I mentioned that at the end of the presentations, we'll have a virtual walkabout where participants in the webinar can jump between supports and talk to the providers directly. So here's a preview of the different breakouts that we'll be offering. We have Culturally Responsive Practice Leadership Academy, Culturally Responsive Teaching Academy, Inclusive Instruction /UDL, Tiered Literacy, Tiered Math, Social Emotional Behavioral Academy, and I want to make a quick note about that one. In the past, we have had two different academies, one around PBIS and another around social emotional learning and mental health. This year, for a number of strategic reasons, we're actually bringing those two together, including the providers and coaches together, into one singular academy. You will, if you sign up for this one, you'll be given the option of picking two paths. So you could do a track around PBIS, or you could do a track starting around social, emotional, mental health. But it allows for more fluidity, and there's obviously a lot of overlap there, and we're trying to support the integration. So quick note on that, we still are supporting people on PBIS, and we're still supporting people on social, emotional learning and mental health, but sort of creating one coherent academy there. We also have the Systemic Student Support Academy, which is really looks at integrated or optimized student support systems. And then, so those are the 7 MTSS Academies, which you're going to hear about momentarily. But then we also have a number of other offerings in the catalog that you can choose to go to a breakout about. We have a couple sense of belonging networks being offered next year, which we have someone who can represent that. We have Ed Tech Network. We also have a Learning Acceleration Network run by CNTP. As I mentioned before, we have the Gleam Grant, and I will also be in a breakout to talk about regional assistance if you're a school or district supported by the statewide system of support. All right, I want to just stop briefly here and see if there are any questions about the information I just provided, which I know is a good amount of information. Any questions now?
I had a quick question.
Sure.
Would you mind explaining what the structure of the breakout rooms looks like? So if I hop into one, you know, I make a stop right when the beginning of that time window starts. Do I miss, you know, the introductory whatever that another breakout room might have going on at the same time?
That's a great question, Catherine. So rather than having it be like a very formal presentational type of format, it's really going to be more conversational. And so it's totally okay. We thought about doing a couple different like official rounds of breakouts, but we know sometimes people like just have this one little question that they want to ask really quickly, or they might want to stay for an extended period and talk at more depth. So it won't be formal presentations. So if you hop into one and then you switch to another, that should not be a problem at all. And it'll be very informal.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great question. Thank you for asking. Great. Well, if you think of anything in the interim, please feel free to type them into the chat or send them to us later. But then without further ado, let's jump into the presentations. So I will be womaning the slides here. So our partners will just give me cues when they need me to change slides here, but in alphabetical order, we're going here today and would love to start with our Culturally Responsive Practice Leadership Academy, which is run by Blackprint.
Cool. Bat and lead off here. Good morning, everybody. Dr. Colin Rose, president, co-founder of Blackprint Education Consulting, and we run the Culturally Responsive Practices Leadership Academy. The aims of the Academy you can see here are to aim to support districts in building kind of the internal capacity to weave culturally responsive practice into all parts of the system. Quite often, we work with districts or organizations, and the work of culturally responsive practices is spotty and not well codified. And so, you know, really the goal of this Academy is to talk about, you know, first, what is culturally responsive practice? But how do we define it as a district or as an organization writ large so that it becomes the MO or what's expected within an organization or a district, not kind of work of the coalition of the willing or the spotty work that we quite often see in districts to bring more coherence and fidelity to the work of culturally responsive practice, which is always kind of put up as an approach that will push us towards educational excellence and equity. So really the goals within the Academy mirror kind of the year. So it's really a 3-year process. First year is really a lot of foundational content on the connection of race, culture, education, and kind of what are the scholars, Latson Billings and the such define culturally responsive practices as, and what does that mean? At the same time, we're working with districts to talk about processes and planning around equity and how that connects to kind of the work that you do. Second year, we really want to get to a point where we're defining the work across the district and creating a framework, and not just a high-level framework, but a operational framework. So what does this look like for everybody in the organization? And then the third year is really around kind of taking that framework and seeing, where are your strengths and your areas of growth, your strategic areas of growth, so that you can create some goals and be very focused around, again, writ large across the districts, what you need to be focused on. And that looks like a lot of TA on the ground. We can go to the next slide. Prerequisites for the Academy. We're asking that there's a good amount of consensus and buy-in with the leadership at the district, especially the superintendent, that there's a commitment to do the work. This is not an academy that's trying to really convince the district to do it. This is where you all are at the point where you're committed to doing work. You're not sure how to get started and to actually make it systematized across the district. There'll be in-person sessions or Zoom sessions basically every month. Really the tone and tenor, especially the first 2 years, is a content PD, usually over Zoom, and then a one-on-one kind of strategy meeting with the district the second month, and going back and forth. And that's about 2.5 hours a month. And then, obviously, as we get into goal setting, creating frameworks, there will be additional time kind of in between session. And we're looking for districts to start making that kind of third space where leadership can talk about culturally responsive practice across the district and take this on beyond the 3 years. Team composition, I'm going to go over every role. It's right there. I'm trying to stay on time. But really, when you look at these roles, these required participants, we call them roles because, depending how big the district is, there might not be one point person for each one of these. Some people might wear multiple hats, but this is what we're looking for, kind of a broad representation of leadership, quote unquote, across the district, from the teacher level all the way up to the superintendent level. And even our suggested participants in a lot of districts we work with now have school committee members on it, influential parents, executives from the local teachers union, et cetera, right? We want to get broad consensus across the district or the organization and have buy-in as well as the lens. Key academy supports, again, I talked about this dual operation system we like to think about, where it's professional development, right? So what is the content that gets us to the understanding of what culturally responsive practice is? At the same time, how are we embedding that into our practices in the way that we're organizing ourselves as a district, right? And so those two things will be kind of the yin and the yang. Complementary resources, there'll be district visits, right? There'll be kind of light touch ones the first couple of years, and the third year will be a lot of district visits, according to whatever framework you're adopting as a district, to get to an understanding of how far away you are from what that framework is and in what areas, so you can start some strategic planning. And then there's also office hours in between meetings if needed. And we can go to the last slide. This is just a brief slide about us. Black Print Education Consulting. We work with districts and organizations all the way, again, from the superintendent level. We have folks that have kind of led districts and were in district leadership, all the way down to the teacher and community level, community organizers and folks that work kind of hand in hand with teachers. So in everything in between, again, we always push for both excellence and equity in whatever we're doing. So again, I'm Colin Rose, co-founder president. My colleague who's not here, Dr. Hayden Frederick Clark, is a founder and CEO. We ask that you contact, if you need to contact, business manager at theblackprintinc.com. I'll be in the waiting in one of those breakout rooms, and I'll see you later if you have any more questions. I think I hit my 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think you did perfect, Colin.
Yeah, I'll pass it along to whoever's next.
Wonderful, thanks. And a quick note about this, some people are like, you have 2 culturally responsive academies, what's up with that? And when we decided to start this set of academies, we hadn't necessarily intended to have 2, but we had this plethora of really provocative and impactful offerings that came forward, and 2 that rose to the top took a very different approach. One was with Black Print, as you just heard, really thinking about the district level systems as a starting point. And then on the other side, a proposal from AdaptiveX, and you'll hear from Shayla in just a moment, really thinking about instructional practice. And we thought both of those were so important, obviously connected, right? As we think about district systems, we need to look at what's happening in classrooms. And as we're looking at what's happening in classrooms, we need to think about the accompanying district systems. But two very sort of different ways of coming at it, and thought it really made sense to provide both opportunities for schools and districts depending on where they were and what made most sense in their context. So without further ado, I would love to hand it over to Shayla.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Shayla Adams Stafford, the CEO and founder of AdaptiveX, and I just dropped my information there in the chat for you to check out as well. So AdaptiveX, we provide a comprehensive approach to culturally responsive teaching and learning by really supporting districts in determining, what are some of the systems that are working well in supporting instructional practice around culturally responsive teaching and learning, also supporting with ongoing coaching, and then identifying specifically how we can build capacity with your instructional coaches, school leaders, and teachers to engage in this work in a sustainable fashion. And so this program is really perfect for districts that want to align their culturally responsive and anti-racist policies with their actual instruction and systems. And so the way that we do this is through our 11 research-based identified promising practices. These are culturally responsive practices that are proven to really support students in grade level rigor, establishing that sense of belonging, and really taking ownership of their learning, which are a lot of the core components of culturally responsive teaching and learning. And so I'll talk more in the breakout room about some of those promising practices if you'd love to hear more about those. But really, what can you expect after working with us for several years? Really understanding the how to, give me a +1 in the chat if your district or school has done a book study or done an article review or really started this work of culturally responsive teaching and learning, but you're just like, okay, now what? Okay, how do we actually do this in our classroom? That's something that we often see in our work throughout the country. Folks are really trying to figure out, how do I implement this on a day-to-day basis? And that's really what our work is. We help schools develop a customized benchmark for developing look-fors for culturally responsive practices as they evaluate educators. We do an in-depth school-level equity landscape analysis to identify the strengths and areas of growth around this work. But something that educators and school leaders really love is that by the time you finish working with us, you will have a library of culturally responsive lessons that your educators have developed as a result of implementing our practices, collecting those artifacts, and analyzing that data through our program. And so really one of the other core things that you will gain from this is really a CRT action plan, which will help to align your goals around culturally responsive teaching at your school site with the school improvement goals that you've set out through the district. So we can go ahead and go forward. So our school requirements that we're looking for schools that participate with us would be, having an instructional coach or a teacher leader as part of the initial team, supporting up to 10 teachers in year one, with the understanding that the program will grow annually. We believe that's the best way to have an organic adoption of these practices within a school site. And then really educators should meet for at least 2 sessions per month, bi-weekly sessions per month for at least 60 minutes at length in order to engage with the promising practices which are housed on our own learning management system. So really the commitments that we're looking for schools that will engage in our workshops that we'll have throughout the year, equity-centered coaching workshops, leadership vision setting workshops, and quarterly deep dive sessions where we'll be modeling practices, supporting with, how to anticipate some of the challenges you will face in implementing culturally responsive teaching practices. And really, how do you do this at the classroom level? And really, we will foster an ongoing coaching relationship at the district and school-based level to support in the implementation of these practices. We can go forward here. So some of the support that you'll receive from the Academy, again, really the biggest area of support you'll receive will be through the targeted coaching, not only at the district level, but individualized coaching at the school level. Our quarterly sessions to really come back to that action plan and determine what progress you're making as a school, and then modeling those best practices. And then we also have webcasts, newsletters, access to our LMS system, which has tons of grab and go resources that educators really love that they can take and use literally the next class period. We can go forward. So again, we are an organization with a national team of highly trained consultants that have worked in education. Most have over a decade of experience working in the classroom, specifically around culturally responsive practices. And many of our educators that work with us are former school leaders and district leaders as well. And so, we're working with over 50 schools across the nation, specifically working on implementing these practices within classrooms. And so we would love to hear more about some of the challenges you're facing and goals that you have and how we might be able to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Shayla. All right, so we're going to pivot now to our Inclusive Instruction Academy with a heavy focus on UDL. Kristen.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm so excited. My name is Kristen Rodriguez, and I am here to welcome you to learn about two academies that we currently support. My colleague and brain partner in all of this is Dr. Katie Novak. She will be here and she will help me in the breakout sessions. So there's one of us in each of the academies. Universal Design for Learning, if you're not familiar with it, really comes from the work of cognitive neuroscience research, and it's using the brain in ways that allow all students to be successful. So we really ground a lot of the work that we do in these evidence-based practices, but it's not exclusive to UDL. We also do other evidence-based practice work, such as a focus on co-teaching practice. So there's lots of great things that we get to support you in this work around the Inclusive Instruction Academy. Like others, we are in a kind of 3-year sequence of support. We look at them as phases because some schools might come in at already more of an advanced phase than others. So wherever you are, we'll meet you there and we'll continue that work. But you can see here, it's very small, but all of this information is on the look for documents and other areas that you can access it. We're introducing the work of Universal Design for Learning to all staff in the first year. And then we begin what we call our cadre or early adopters cohort of about 20% of your staff. And we support them through the professional learning that will have enough hours to impact student outcomes in a really positive way. Scaling up in year 3 and then launching you. It's really our job to get ourselves out of work here, right? So we really want to make sure that we help you create sustainable systems and programs. So you'll see in what we're talking about that there's a train the trainer model, and it's really, we're trying to create those conditions so that you can continue without our support after you leave the academy. So we'll go to the next slide. Just thinking about team composition, we offer various supports. So at different points throughout the academy, different groups of educators are going to get the support. Our planning team members, we do want a district level administrator because MTSS is systems wide. So we want that collaboration with central office. We want a building principal, and then we work with your existing school-based planning teams, whether that's an ILT, your school councils, or your leadership team, to integrate this work into your existing improvement planning processes. We also will identify one instructional coach per team who will support the site-based train the trainer professional development moving forward. We'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in the next couple of slides. And all teachers actually will have access to support from us over the course of the 3 years, either through targeted technical assistance, which is site specific. It could be on site if requested or remote if requested, and also some additional offerings that we provide to all staff. Just to go back one more time, I paused, which gave her the cue to go back, but we'll go back to the previous slide. And just in terms of commitment, we just want to let you know that we try to ensure that you get the robust level of support you need, but that it doesn't take over your life. So we do 1 hour webinars. We're doing them by cohort next year. So your webinars would be at 3:30. Those are all being 1 hour, except for one day in September, where you'll learn about UDL as a full day with your coach, so that you can support this work and have kind of that schema of what UDL is. I'll give you monthly newsletters with lots of goodies, practices, protocols, exemplars, things of that nature for planning. And I will be available for monthly planning, personalized planning with your team, your planning team, 4 of which we would like to see everyone engage in around professional development planning. How do we integrate this into your action plan, et cetera? And each of you will get a data consult, 1 hour data consult with a data specialist who will work with you to kind of look at where your outcomes are, so we can track growth over time. In terms of submitting kind of artifacts at the end, we're going to be looking for, the completion of a self-assessment that we're going to guide you through in the process, a PD plan, an assessment plan, and an action plan. So grounded all by your instructional vision. So we'll work you through this. Nothing should feel like at the end, oh my gosh, what's going on? We're going to step by step walk you through that process. Okay, we're going to move on. And this is, again, that last slide is consistent with the literacy. So this one will be a longer presentation, literacy, a little smaller. We give you robust professional learning throughout the course of your 3 years. First year, everyone's going to have access to 3 full day UDL 101 sessions for your staff. That can be full day sessions integrated into things like PD days, or broken up into 15-hour increments of support, maybe faculty meetings or department meetings, other ways that we can give it support you. We have a robust train the trainer coaching support session and graduate course train the trainer. So at the end, you will actually have a graduate course instructor who can teach the graduate level course back on site for you. We guide you through the whole process. We give you the syllabus, we train them and everything, but it's a really nice opportunity for that. All staff will have access to annual professional learning communities. We do these after school and remotely, so folks can come in and do those and not need class coverage. An annual book club is done every year after school remotely. We give you book group facilitation manuals and 30 hours of virtual training modules that you can use as you wish. The only difference between first and second year is by second year, we're doing site-specific technical assistance based on your plan. What do you need and what do you want? That's how we'll engage in the technical assistance support for you. And you can't see these, they're just there for kind of visual representations, but Dr. Novak creates a whole series of instructional goodies that gets distributed in the coaching sessions and in the newsletters. These are 2 examples. One talks about like, how do you support working memory? The other is on the concept of reciprocal teaching. So again, they're teacher-centered and focused to really impact instruction, while I'll work with the leadership team to create systems. So on the next slide, this is just a little bit about us. So we're not going to go into any of it, except my contact information is on there. It's also in the chat. We work in, between the 2 of us, over 28 countries, over 31 states. We have over 100 Massachusetts districts that we support, but this is going on record, Katie, and it's going to be posted. So I don't even think I should say this, but of course, Massachusetts is our favorite place because both of us have over 20 years as Massachusetts educators and have worked in the public schools ourselves here. So you just have our heart, and we're just going to dedicate everything to you. So we're really excited to work with you. So I'm going to go right into tiered literacy. We want to let you know that we are going into our 5th year of inclusive instruction, and we have a new agreement, so we'll have 3 more years of that. Tiered Literacy Academy is currently up for review. It happens through all of our courses. So what I'm going to share with you is if we were to continue as the Tiered Literacy Academy providers, what it will look like. If there is a different provider, it would look a little different from this, but it gives you a good idea of what we would do, what we have done, and what you'll get as a part of this academy.
Listen, can I elaborate on that just for a quick sec?
Sure.
Perfect. Yeah. So as folks can imagine, we put out sort of bids for organizations to provide these academies, and the bids are good for X number of years, like multi-year agreement. So as Kristen just mentioned, the Literacy Academy is coming June 30th will be the end of the current bid. And so we have to renew it and it will be out for new bids. There could be other organizations that apply. I imagine that Kristen and Katie will also be applying. And so as she mentioned, we're describing what it's looked like. It could very well look like this again next year, but we'll just have to see through that procurement process. And by the way, a real quick thing, we have actually had teams apply from other states to academies before. We're like, we're looking them up in our state system. We're like, where is this place? And we realize they're like all over the place. So, you know, Massachusetts, we keep it for you. We keep it for you. So, all right, Kristen, go ahead.
Okay. Wonderful. So in this academy, it's a very similar structure of 3 years, integration of scaling over time. We are really focused on evidence-based literacy and acceleration practices in tier 1. So this is, again, the model for next year. In tiers 2 and 3, we really focus on targeted and intensive literacy support. If you do not have high quality instructional materials, we will guide you through the adoption of that. If you do, we'll support you in the implementation of that. And we're talking about high quality instructional materials, not only at your core literacy, but also in your interventions. So what kind of evidence-based instructional intervention practices and resources do you need and want? How do you have a robust literacy assessment system that can ensure the appropriate tiered supports? We also will focus on some of that foundational thing like staffing, scheduling, and data use to make sure that we're meeting the needs at a systemic level. The professional development I will go over in the next slide, but again, you're looking at kind of scaling it up and getting ourselves out of a job here. That's the purpose and hope, is that you will be able to continue to grow after you leave and graduate from all of our academies. So we're going to go into the next slide. Again, very similar level of planning support. We'll have a literacy coach who will get literacy professional development and a train the trainer graduate course support as well. It's the exact same sequence. So if you're in one or both of the academies, you don't have to duplicate those sessions, those webinars. You'll be with us. The only difference is there's going to be a universally designed a literacy leadership, training in September. So it's literacy leadership versus UDL. That's the only distinction. And then we collaborate and support you. So going on to the next slide, this is a little bit more specificity about the content that we provide. We have 2 cohorts, a pre-K to 3 cohort and a 4 through 12 cohort model for next year. We do site-specific. Each team gets 20 hours of site-specific, either on-site or remote as you wish. Technical assistance in the leadership realms. We're focusing on high-quality instructional materials, creating assessment maps, and data trees. Our teaching technical assistance is going to focus on early reading accelerators at the early elementary level and in-class acceleration strategies at the 4 through 12 level. We're going to offer an online PLC. It's going to be focused on core literacy block. All staff are going to be available to take this should they want. It's after school hours and it's remote. And the focus is on managing the 2-hour literacy block via foundational skills, engaging with complex text, writing, and oral language in pre-K to 3. 4 through 12 is going to be focusing on evidence-based reading and writing practices across the content areas. We're going to have different study groups. Those are also after school available to all staff. It's a great resource. We've been reading about the logic of English. That's going to be the focus of pre-K to 3. The focus for 4 through 12 is going to be deeper learning. Our literacy coaches are going to be focusing on different things based on level. At the early elementary, it's going to be on early reading and the simple view of reading. At the secondary level, it's going to be writing instruction in a culturally responsive classroom. Our graduate courses are also going to be distinct. The topic will be the same, but obviously the strategies and supports for providing reading interventions are going to look different at the pre-K to 3 level than they are going to look at the upper elementary through secondary level. And our webinar series for leaders is going to focus on reading intervention materials and models. So that gives you kind of, I think, some level of understanding of the actual topics and content that you would be getting in our work for next year. So we'll go to the Next slide, which again is just us. You might want to mute that because it might play, or stop it. Thank you. The testimonial thing will play out loud. But again, one thing we want to say is we've been really lucky over the past couple of years to form some great relationships in the work we're doing, both at the national level. And so we're not only going to continue with our robust supports, but we're partnering moving forward with internationally known presenters who are featured in NCTE and ILA. So really looking at those people that are kind of supporting that work at evidence-based practices nationally and internationally. That's who we're going to be tapping in for some of our content creation, maybe some of the webinars and things like that. And of course, we always work really closely and try to support what is coming out of DESE and create that bridge for you between guidance and application. We see that as our role. So that's all. I don't know if I did it within the 10, but I know it was super, super quick. But there's lots of info that's available to you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. Now we will transition to our friends at the U.S. Math Recovery Council on the Tiered Math Academy.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dina Mendola, and I'm excited to be here as the project lead specialist with U.S. Math Recovery Council and the Tiered Math Academy. We have been partnered with DESE for the past 5 years, and we're very excited to continue and extend that partnership within Massachusetts. With the Tiered Math Academy, we work with school districts to transform mathematical education through customized and unique professional development, along with meaningful assessment, instruction, and coaching for the systemic impact. Our research extends from administrators to classroom teachers, interventionists, coaches, special education teachers, paraprofessionals, and beyond. The partnership begins with developing a multi-year strategic plan based on the needs of each individual school or district that we are partnered with, including the development of a mathematical leadership team, which includes an AVMR champion for continued sustainability. This work helps our educators learn and use diagnostic assessment data to inform the decision-making that's related to professional development activities, resource allocation, coaching, in order to provide equitable instruction for all of our students. Together we work and we determine various pathways, providing dynamic professional development to address a multi-tiered systems of support for kindergarten through 8th grade educators based on number topics. This professional development, alongside with the implementation support and our coaching, impacts the way that educators think about how students learn mathematics in order to build consistency and intentional design, implementation, and to be able to analyze mathematical instruction based on the student's individual needs. A key component of our work is with the professional development and building district leadership to help develop, refine, extend knowledge of the mathematical content and the pedagogy in order to build capacity for sustainable systems and implementation. So we work with and we're able to address these tiered systems of supports and pathways for educators at both the elementary and the secondary level. Each team consists of, I apologize, I am fighting off a cold. Each team consists of administrators, teacher leaders, and a variety of other educational staff members. And as you can see here, the pathways are really customized and specific based on the need of each individual school and district. So these are just an example that you can see as we look at those different pathways. Prerequisites are identified and we openly discuss them with the team members for this agreed upon work and commitment towards building that sustainable. And I have to piggyback off our the last speaker in saying that our job is to work ourselves out of the system so that they can build systemic sustainability and all tiered levels of support within their own districts.
Can you move the slide forward, Becca? Sorry.
Yep.
Okay. Yep, we're right there. All right. As you can see here within this pathway, these are a couple examples of pathways that schools and districts may opt for. We do not offer one way to proceed, but rather we work together to carefully craft an intentional pathway forward for these schools and districts that we're partnered with to meet their needs and that of their students. As we collaborate with this, we meet monthly to monitor progress and to make adjustments as needed and to continue to refine and develop that pathway forward to best meet the needs. And you can also see within the slide that there are a variety of courses that we offer through the Academy. We are happy to share that we also are able to offer graduate level credits for only $40 per credit for each of these courses that the teachers that participate with us take. This is an exciting opportunity and a service that we're able to extend to participate within our coursework. As you can see by the design in here, by the end of year 3, we're really working to create mathematic champions within each school and district for that sustainability. They will then be able in turn to deliver the courses that they initially took within their district, as well as work with implementation and lead that work forward for that sustained implementation beyond the initial team in the first year. You do have our tiered Math Academy brochure, so you can see the complete descriptions that we have on each of these variety of courses that are offered. So you can also go to our website to review the research that we have, as well as the results. The research really underlines some of those underpinnings, the efficacy and the effectiveness that's linked to culturally responsive teaching of our work at Math Recovery, as well as the impact that it has on students, teachers, and systems. In our website, there are also testimonials at each level within these systems, as within the tiered systems of support that we offer. My coworkers, Mariah Carrington and Kristen Frang, and I will be in the breakout room later if you have any additional questions.
Great. Thank you, Dina.
Yeah.
And I feel you, I'm also fighting something off. So
it's real, right? The struggle's real.
It's real. For sure. All right, great. So now we're going to transition to the Social Emotional and Behavioral Academy, and we'll actually talk about it in 2 sections, the track around PBIS and also the track around social emotional learning and mental health.
Great, so I'll get us started and then I'll pass things over to my colleague, Adam Feinberg. So my name is Shai Fuchsman. I am with the Education Development Center. We are a Massachusetts-based nonprofit organization, though we do work across the country and across the world. But this academy is just here in Massachusetts, as Becca said, even though we did get applications from other parts of the country as well. The goal of the academy, the Social Emotional Behavior Academy, which, as Becca said, is kind of a new thing we're trying this year, is to help districts and schools develop a cohesive system of social, emotional, and behavioral supports. And as Becca mentioned, we're working on this academy through 2 different tracks. One is the social, emotional, and learning and mental health track. We've been doing the SCL Mental Health Academy for 3 years now. And then the other track is the PBIS track, which has been going on for even longer, I believe about 8 years now. However, while we're working with 2 different tracks, we're going to be working very closely as one cohesive academy. And throughout the year, we're going to find opportunities for participants of both tracks to work together to do some, to kind of integrate some of the professional development opportunities that we offer, so that if you're in one track, you still get a chance to think about and get ideas from the other track as well. So, so that's kind of the overall academy. I'm going to now talk about the SCL and mental health track specifically. So within this track, what we're going to help you do again is think, just like the other academies, is think about SEL mental health from a system perspective. How to make sure that you have your tier 1 SEL supports to help all your students develop social emotional well-being. And that includes both SEL programs, if you're already working on those, or interested in an SEL program, a package program. But more importantly, thinking about SEL practices in the classroom and through school-wide practices, and really also emphasizing the integration of SEL into academic instruction, so that SEL really becomes part of the culture of the school. And then in addition to that, we're also going to help you think about how do you provide additional supports for students who need that additional support through tier 2, mostly a small group, or additional supports, tier 2 interventions, and also tier 3 mental health focused interventions. But beyond just thinking about the 3 tiers, we're also going to help you think about how to have an integrated and cohesive approach by making sure you have a strong team and strong process for identifying, placing, and monitoring students who need tier 2 and tier 3 supports. Some of you might already have a student support team or a child, some people call it whole child team. We're going to help you develop or strengthen that process. And then also kind of looking at the whole system, thinking about the use of data to inform all supports and to help monitor student progress, as well as effective communication coordination of those offering all 3 supports. So how can the classroom teacher work with school adjustment counselor to support the same student who comes into the classroom and to the school adjustment counselor's office? And we're also, as always, emphasize the equity lens. What does it mean to offer equity focused SEL and mental health? So that's what we're helping you develop as a system. Next slide. To do that, we work with you either as a school team or a district team, and that's really going to be your choice, whether you participate as a district or school team. We have teams participating as both. But in either case, much like with the other academies, we want you to establish a team or use an existing team. And I know a lot of schools nowadays have already SEL teams, or districts will have SEL teams. So we can definitely help you to work with the same team you already have. We do ask that you have at least one district representative. So it could be a SEL director. I know many districts are starting that role. If you have an SEL director or some other type of district leader, building level administrator, and if it's a district team, it can be just any one of the building administrators to bring that perspective. Classroom teacher, at least one classroom teacher, and at least one mental health related staff. So a school adjustment counselor, sorry for the missing closing parentheses there. And there's no prerequisites other than a commitment to participate in the academy. And in the next slide, I'll tell you what that entails. So before I get into this slide, I'll just tell you the way we do this, and I forgot to put a slide specifically outlining what we offer, how we offer the support, but the focus of this academy is really around technical assistance and coaching. So we'll have a member of our team assigned to you to really work with you throughout the whole year over the course of 3 years to build this system. And that includes site visits. They'll come facilitate team meetings. We have a lot of tools to help you assess where you're at. One of our guiding principles is we meet you where you're at. So a lot of you have already been thinking about SEL or mental health or both. So really going to help you think about what do you have, what's missing, how do we make sure it's one cohesive system through technical assistance. You have up to 40 hours of TA and coaching throughout the year, every year for 3 years. But in addition to that, we have professional development opportunities, webinars, virtual events. We'll try to do in-person events this year as well, throughout the year as well. And we also have, again, tools, resources, and a website that helps with that. The overall process over 3 years is to begin with defining your vision for SEL mental health in your district. If you don't already have one, developing your team, assessing not only your students, but really assessing the system as a whole, developing an action plan. So that's kind of the first year or the first few months. And then once you have an action plan for how to strengthen, create or strengthen your MTSS system, we focus on effective implementation, continuous quality improvement, monitoring and evaluation, mid-course refinements. And then once you have a model that really works, we focus on sustainability and ongoing continuous quality improvement. So that's the SEL track, and I'll pass things over to Adam to talk about the PBIS track.
Hello, thanks, Shai. My name is Adam Feinberg. I work at UConn, and yes, I get to support the PBS track in the Social Emotional Behavioral Academy. We have been supporting schools under what was previously the PBS Academy for about 8 years, and we're excited for this collaboration. When we think about PBS, we're kind of thinking about that DESE goal of having a sense of belonging with the school. And the major objective of the PBS Academy is helping schools build a PBS framework that really helps improve school climate, making sure that schools have a sense of how do we support social emotional behavior in the building, and think about how we make decisions as a school body. Part of this, we try to really work with schools to build that framework for decision making with the goals of increasing desired behavior, improving classroom positive supports, and really thinking about how we assess and monitor the supports that we put in place, as well as those social emotional behavioral outcomes. Next slide, please. So like many of the other academies, we do support schools across 3 years, and we do offer additional supports beyond that. But specifically, we work with schools, we ask for a 3-year commitment to help build those universal school-wide practices around positive behavioral intervention and supports. We look to have a district lead that works within a district team that helps integrate this within their multi-tiered systems of support goals and various kind of integration and alignment with other initiatives within the district level supports that are targeting social emotional behavior. So having that district lead is really key to help us understand how best to integrate those supports and think about how PBS kind of operates within that district and those schools. In addition, we like to have 2 or 3 coaches that work at the school level that are those kind of leads at each building to help facilitate the implementation of PBS. Again, we will kind of provide that training and support. We need to work together with you all as how will this look within your buildings. And then each school will have a school leadership team that helps make decisions of how this will actually look. How will the framework look within within your buildings? So for a school team, like other folks have said, about 6 to 8 folks, we want to make sure we have a building administrator that can help really make those school-wide decisions of that, hey, this can actually happen. Again, those 2 or 3 coaches that are kind of our point of contact that really kind of take the lead and supporting that team. The team makes the decisions, but those coaches are our leaders in the sense of kind of the direction and monitoring the progress that the schools are making. We'd like to have a parent or 2 parents actually, or community members that really help make sure that the values of the school community are kind of built into that school team decision making. So that's a priority for us. It doesn't have to be right at the start, but we'll help support you to build that across time. And we'd like to have a mixture of both teaching and non-teaching staff within that school leadership team. So there's some flexibility there, and we can help support you. It might start a little bit small in the beginning, and then we can help grow it over time. And again, we like to have a district team, and that district team is there to help really make sure that the work that the school is doing integrates with the district vision and goals around multi-tiered systems of support, and that the district team is there to help think about, how do we sustain these efforts over time? And what do we have to do at the district level to make sure that we are building in those kind of accountability and support systems to make sure that after those 3 years that they're continuing with these efforts. Thank you. Next slide. So as I said, there's 3 years of supports. Those supports are across each of the years have multiple layers. There's team and coaches trainings. There's about 3 team training days per year. The goal of those is to help the team really kind of understand the kind of key components of positive behavioral intervention and supports, and get time to kind of think about how those supports will look like in their buildings and build that framework. There's additional coaches meetings. Those are about an hour and a half, about 7 times a year, and are virtual. And during those times, we help kind of talk about, you know, hey, what's coming up in the team training? How might this look in your building? These, oh, I forgot to say, this is all cohort wide. So you're part of a cohort. So whether you have one school or a couple schools, we will kind of put you in with a cohort. And the benefit of that, and that really comes out in these coaches meetings, is, you know, kind of meeting with other folks that are in the same, that are outside of your building in another school that are in that same place as you are, and either just getting started or just starting to roll out, or kind of modifying. And it's really helpful to have people who are kind of at similar stages to help bounce ideas off and kind of understand kind of how you're problem solving, building those supports. So those coaches trainings or coaches meetings are a mixture of kind of talk time and sharing time, but also kind of a little bit of content about like how might this implement within your school buildings. In addition to the team and coaches trainings, we provide direct technical assistance for each building. We provide data support, and you know, in the breakout rooms, I'm happy to talk more about how that might look. And then also we provide district team building support as well. So different content that we cover across the 3 years. We spend the first year really kind of building those foundational pieces around positive intervention and supports, really kind of getting started. We help hopefully also kind of talk about school and classroom supports, like focusing on what this might look like, not just school-wide, but in each and everyone's classrooms. And then we hopefully schools are ready to kind of roll out in year 2 or 3. And we kind of help with the database decision-making processes and help integrate and tailor that to the systems you have in your buildings. You know, we spend time talking about embedded culturally responsive supports, family school collaboration, escalation and de-escalation around student behavior, and how this might integrate with other school support practices around social emotional behavior. So those are the topics that we cover. Lastly, in addition to the kind of the 3 years of support, we also offer kind of what we call a sustaining PBS Academy. So when schools finish and want some continued kind of contact, we do a sustaining academy, which has some elements of what I spoke to before, some kind of coaches meetings with other coaches across the state to continue to have a check in contact with our trainers to help understand kind of like where you are, helping navigate any kind of major transitions that the school is having, and kind of continue to get support. And within that, there's access to team training events, and we have some technical assistance that we provide if schools will need it, but beyond the 3 years. In addition to that sustaining academy support, we offer a tier 2 academy for next year, and this is a tier 2 academy with the goal of building a 1 or 2 tier 2 supports with regard to positive intervention and supports. And we help schools build their systems, data, and practices around that. So the schools kind of decide what supports they're looking to build. We'll provide some examples, and we help with kind of building what those systems are, how you monitor, and kind of some of that scaffolding needed to kind of roll a couple of tier 2 supports out. Again, that has a lot of similar structures as the previous tier 1 academy, 3 days of tier 2 team training, you know, 7 throughout the year, 7 1.5-hour coaches meetings, and direct technical assistance. Okay, I think that's all I had. Thank you all.
Thank you, Adam and Shai. And last but most definitely not least, happy to have Ellie speak to the Systemic Student Support Academy.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Ellie Jansen. I am a senior associate at the Rennie Center for Education, Research, and Policy, and co-facilitator of the Systemic Student Support Academy alongside my colleagues at Boston College's Center for Thriving Children. So I'm going to talk a bit about S3, shorthand for Systemic Student Support. So we really start by acknowledging that every child is unique. And we, pulling from research and developmental science, and apologies, I think this slide is animated. You can just click through. Perfect, thanks. We know a couple things, that multiple developmental domains interact, So academic development can't be separated from social emotional development and so forth. We know that developmental trajectories are not static, but often are dynamic and complex. And so we really take into account the entire development of a child. That strengths and needs co-act to impact development. And in S3, we really believe that race, culture, history, identity can't be detached when we're talking about whole child and how to support a whole child. And we can hop forward. And that's really where we start, which is supporting the whole child and ensure that we're supporting each and every whole child. So what we do in the Academy is support schools to reimagine student support, to really focus on the holistic development of each and every student. And what this is really a strengths-based preventative approach to student support. And we work with you to take a kind of existing structures and systems within your school, so not creating something new, but codifying, improving, and coordinating existing structures for supporting students to really ensure that we're taking that strengths-based holistic approach, but also we're reaching every child to ensure that they receive the support that they need at the time that they need it. Come forward. So our approach really looks at the best practices and research behind integrated student support. And that focuses on 4 main components. The first is that student support should be individualized, that each and every child's strengths and needs are reviewed, that we take that whole child approach, that student support is continuous. So every student is reviewed and supported on a continuous basis because we know development is ever changing. And that it's systematic. So approach and uniform is, our approach and follow up is always uniform, and we're creating a system to support individualized student support. So what to expect being a part of this academy? Really, we examine and fortify your school's student support processes. As I mentioned before, shifting to a proactive or preventative approach to student support. Making sure that no student falls through the cracks, really having a system in place to catch all students and support them in that holistic way. And as I mentioned, we really want to build upon existing structures that you have. So we're not creating a new system, but really coordinating and taking some of the chaos and making it streamlined to review student data, to discuss strengths and needs of all students, and really connecting them with vital resources to support their needs and their strengths. And we do that by creating individual support plans for all students based upon a holistic review of their strengths and needs. We really place equity at the center of student support practices, ensuring teams make student support decisions that affirm each child's cultural and linguistic identities. And the last is we work with you to organize resources, interventions, enrichments into one place, into that coordinated type of system I'm speaking to really ensure that students are able to get connected with the supports and services that they need at the time that they need it. The last thing is for schools or districts who may be seeking to adopt a more kind of prescribed or evidence-based model around integrated student support. This year, we're offering a track that will allow you to access City Connects, which is out of Boston College. And if this is something you would be interested, I'm happy to talk more about it, and we can support you in assessing whether that would be a good fit. Happy to talk about that more in the breakout rooms as well. So team composition for the Academy, we're really designed to support school-based teams because this work really lives at the school level. So we do want district level support involved. So we ask that a school administrator or designee with decision-making authority is present, a student support related staff member, teacher or teachers to pilot this work. Usually we start with a classroom or a grade band to really start to take on this holistic approach to reviewing students. Again, district level administration is really important at representation. And along the process, we always want to mention that there are various stakeholders involved, of course, students, families, other community partners, et cetera. In your first year, we're really heavy on the content. As many of the academies have mentioned, that first year is a lot about setting the foundation, seeing what practices and systems and structures you already have, how we can start to make that action plan to really shift to reaching all students within your building. So we'll match that with kind of up to 5 large network sessions where you'll do cross-learning, content, et cetera. and then individual technical assistance sessions that runs all through the 3 years, but that will be the first year. And then the second and third year, we really want to tailor to support you, your needs, and your context, to support with scaling and sustaining this work as you eventually leave from our support, as many of the other academies have mentioned. So that technical assistance piece is huge. We're also going to be doing site visits, should that be safe and something that you will like, et cetera. So I'm excited to be doing that again. And as I mentioned, I represent the Rennie Center, and my colleagues at Boston College's Center for Thriving Children really bring the content expertise to this. So we're rich with resources and knowledge, happy to talk more in the breakout rooms. I placed my contact in the chat as well. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Ellie. And you know, systemic student support not only came last alphabetically, but in some ways makes sense philosophically too, because it's like looking at all the different domains that we've talked about in some of the other academies and thinking about the student support systems that integrate all of the data that you're collecting on and working on in those other areas into one cohesive approach. So thanks so much. All right, so we're like almost on time, very close. And we're now gonna transition to the part of the session where people can go to talk to providers individually if you have specific questions. I think we're gonna, if we could stop the recording now, so folks at home